So good morning, everybody. Welcome to The Purpose of Giving. We're going to have an insightful conversation about the state of philanthropy, but before we get started, I do want to acknowledge our sponsors, of course, as good nonprofit folks do. Thank you again to the Plaza for having us here, and thank you to Atlanta Film Society also for sponsoring our event this morning, and to our sponsor, TriNet. So thank you. Can we get a round of applause for all those fabulous people? I wanted to get started, and I can see you guys for the most part. Why don't we do a quick hand raise? So if you are a nonprofit staff member, raise your hand. Awesome. If you are a board member of a nonprofit, raise your hand. Amazing. If you are a funder, raise your hand. And everybody turn and look and see. Awesome. And if you are a donor, do you donate to a nonprofit? Raise your hand. Amazing. Excellent. It's good to see you all. Thank you for being here. So my name is Laura Hennighausen. I am Purpose Possible's Director of Strategic Philanthropy. And I am really happy to be here to moderate with our esteemed guest today. Here at Purpose Possible, we power mission-driven organizations to achieve their goals and make a lasting impact in their communities through consulting services like fundraising and strategy. I'm sure many of you have worked with us, and we have worked with many of you. And actually, if you work for Purpose Possible, raise your hand. Yay. Thank you to our folks here. So we have clients across the country. We also have consultants across the country, and our nonprofits that we work with are of all shapes and sizes. And so we really hear from them, from you, about what's going on in the philanthropic sphere and what we need to do. And often that does involve raising money, as we know. So that is why we're here today to talk about Giving USA's 2025 report. Today, we're going to dive into the key data. We're going to explore recent shifts in donor behavior and discuss how we can all use these impacts to strengthen our strategies and increase our impact. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so think about what questions you want to ask our panelists here. And I also wanted to say that once we are recording this, you will receive a recording of this event, along with some notes. We have some note takers in the crowd here today that'll be compiling our learnings. So yeah, look out for that email later this week. So I'm going to introduce our panelists now. So to guide us through this important conversation, we have an incredible panel. I'm going to sit down for this part. Okay, so first, probably does not need an introduction. This is Atiba Mbiwan. I just did that. My last name is Hennighausen. I understand. It happens. Okay. Atiba is the executive director of the Zeist Foundation here in Atlanta. Atiba is a family man with 2 adult children and 8 grandchildren in Georgia schools, ranging from early learning to higher education. He attended Brown University and graduated in 1982 with a BA degree in economics and urban studies, including a semester at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. When he was a high school teacher in Providence, Rhode Island, Atiba served as a National Endowment of the Humanities Summer Fellow, and in Atlanta, he was in the inaugural class of the Education Policy Fellowship Program managed by the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. Atiba currently serves on the board of directors of Park Pride and of the East Coast Greenway Alliance, and his 3 decades of volunteering with the Bragg Dream Team, a statewide youth cycling program in Georgia, led to his recognition as an Atlanta Journal-Constitution 2024 Everyday Hero. So welcome, Atiba. Awesome. Next, we have Ashley Collier. At Boys and Girls Club of Atlanta's, as Boys and Girls Club of Atlanta's Metro, shouldn't have asked me to do this, Susanna. As Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta's Chief Development Officer, Ashley oversees all fundraising efforts and strategies. Ashley brings with her an impressive wealth of experience, boasting over 14 years of nonprofit and fundraising expertise. Previously serving as the Director of Development at Westside Future Fund, she led critical fundraising initiatives and strategic endeavors. Her remarkable achievements include securing the largest donation in the organization's history during their most extensive campaign. Before her tenure at Westside Future Fund, Ashley served as the Director of Development at Hands On Atlanta, where she not only expanded the fundraising team, but also enhanced signature events to optimize revenue generation. Her dedication to philanthropy extends further back, having held positions as a development officer at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and Furman University. Ashley earned her BA from Furman University and her Master's of Business Administration from Charleston Southern University. Outside of her professional endeavors, Ashley enjoys exploring family-friendly attractions across Atlanta with her husband and their 2 daughters, all while fervently supporting the Atlanta United. Yeah, clap for that. Next, we have Reverend Tony Johns. Tony Johns is an ordained minister and executive director of Crossroads Community Ministries in Atlanta since 2016. A graduate of Lee University and Pentecostal Theological Seminary, where he was named Alumnus of the Year in 2011, Tony has had over 25 years of experience in nonprofit leadership, homeless services, community development, and education. Tony's experience includes serving as Director of Academics for Master's Commission Collegiate Training Center, Atlanta, and as founder of the Richmond Oaks Mission, a community development ministry for immigrants and refugees located in South Atlanta. As director of the Richmond Oaks Mission, he developed the Urban Discipleship Center to train young people in urban community development. Tony has also held leadership roles at the Mission Atlanta, City of Refuge, and has taught theology and nonprofit development at universities and conferences. He is an active member and preacher at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Atlanta. So welcome, Reverend Tony. Last but not least, off camera here, we have Laura MacDonald. Laura is a CFRE and has over 40 years of experience in fundraising and philanthropy. Her early career in media and communications informed her ability to tell compelling stories for hundreds of nonprofit clients. Her fundraising acumen was further sharpened when working on the team during The Ohio State University's first billion-dollar campaign. In 2000, boo. In 2000, Laura founded Benefactor Group, a firm that has served for those who serve the common good for 25 years by helping hundreds of nonprofit organizations fuel their cause with powerful fundraising, people, and systems. A frequent speaker, expert advisor, and published thought leader, Laura's insights have appeared in Advancing Philanthropy, Nonprofit Quarterly, Forbes, The New York Times, Ms. Magazine, and the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and more. Laura is the author of the Endowment Handbook. Her leadership includes service to and involvement with the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the American Alliance of Museums, the Generosity Commission, the Giving Institute, and the Giving USA Foundation, where she served as board chair from 2020 to 2022. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our full panel here. All right, so before we ask our panelists to dive into this data, we're gonna ask Laura to provide an overview of the Giving USA report and tell us what all those numbers mean.
Good, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I know we're running a little bit behind, and so to make up some time, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because I find that the most dynamic part of a session like this is when we have a chance to converse and you have a chance to ask us questions. So we'll try to get to that as quickly as we can. As we do, I am going to be sharing some slides that our firm creates. How many of you have purchased or subscribed to Giving USA? People. We need to do better. Then you know that the annual report on the sources and uses of charitable giving is now a 400-page book. It's great beach reading, by the way. But our firm then has taken the opportunity to take that 400-page book and we boil it down to an infographic. So most of the visuals that you're going to be seeing today come from this annual infographic that we do. And at the end, you'll see a QR code. So if you want to download this or even fill out a form, and we will send you a hard copy in the mail, old school. Happy to do that. So that'll let me run through some of these things a little bit more quickly and get to the real meat of the conversation. I'm also a wanderer, so I hope that everybody can see me okay. So let's talk about, Giving USA is the annual report on the sources and uses of giving in America. It's published by the Giving USA Foundation, which is a nonprofit, and written and researched at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. So this data has been collected since 1967. It's an amazing longitudinal study of trends in charitable giving. And what we know is that in 2024, so last year, what we saw was that charitable giving reached $592.5 billion. So an important thing to remember is it starts at zero every year. This is not an annuity that builds on itself. It starts from zero and climbs, so $592 billion. In 2024, that was about 6.5% growth, 6.3% to be exact. Average growth over the last 40 years is just under 6%, so it was a pretty good year for charitable giving. The difference is that this year feels a little different, doesn't it? So we'll dive into some of that. Where did all of that come from? So we have seen ever since we started collecting the data that the largest source of charitable dollars is individual donors. So if you have one data point to take back to your colleagues and especially your board members who are eager for you to do grant proposals and go get corporate sponsorships, remind them that individuals fuel the charitable giving economy. We do see that there are also generosity coming from foundations and from corporations. And then there are bequests. Who do bequests come from? Individual donors. And about half of that foundation giving comes from one of two things: closely held family foundations or donor-advised funds. So even though 66% seems like a high proportion of charitable giving that's driven by individual donors, the fact is that 85% of charitable dollars come from individuals who are making decisions about what is or used to be their own money. So again, that's really the hard work. Is there anybody here from currently with higher education? These are the folks who have figured out portfolio management. They're engaging those individual donors. Every one of your donors probably graduated from some fine institution of higher learning, and they've been contacted 3 times this year. So they're showing us all, how do we do better work in engaging individual donors? Like I said, the data goes back to 1967. The book's gotten bloated enough. We only put the last 40 years of data in the book, but it actually goes back to 1967. And if you take a look at the trends over time of who's providing those charitable dollars, what is the main thing that you see here?
I see a growth in foundation.
A growth in foundation giving and a decrease in giving from? Does this mean that individuals are any less generous? No. It simply means that they've switched their giving habits, especially high net worth households. So in charitable giving terms and philanthropy terms, high net worth is defined as a household with $200,000 or more of annual income and $1 million in accumulated assets, excluding the primary residence. So if they're making $200,000 a year and they've got $1 million or more in retirement assets, a second home, a portfolio, what have you, that's about 5% of the American population. They provide 65% of the charitable dollars. Of all giving from individual donors, it's largely, now some of that is because we as fundraisers have been taught that those are the donors that we should be engaging and cultivating. So some of that is us shooting ourselves in the foot. Some of it is also simply reflecting the way that financial resources are distributed in our economy today. But given that high net worth and ultra high net worth households are driving the top line of this data, what we see is that more and more they are deciding to give, not from the checkbook that they use for their mortgage or their car payment or what have you, but through a donor-advised fund or a closely held family foundation. So when we see that foundation piece growing, it's growing as a result of this use of different giving platforms. It's not as a result of diminishing generosity from the American people. Although we will and should talk at some point about the fact that fewer American households are participating in charitable giving than have. It's been declining since the beginning of this century. So we'll talk about that a little bit.
Does this include donations of assets or just cash?
No, this includes any gift to a 501c3 nonprofit organization. It includes in-kind gifts, and I will tell you that, do we have any corporate giving representatives in the room today? Okay, you raised your hands very tentatively. So today, corporations give on average less than 1% of corporate pre-tax profits, about 0.92% of corporate pre-tax profits. Corporate giving has been growing in real dollar terms, but it's been diminishing as a percentage of corporate pre-tax profits. And a chunk of that corporate giving is in-kind donations from corporations, particularly in-kind donations of pharmaceuticals. So the pharmaceutical companies giving drugs, often short-dated drugs, directly to consumers who can't afford to pay for them. So just understand the dynamic there. And this is at one place where, and I know we're going to talk about this some, but one place where the new tax legislation is really going to come into play, because starting next year, corporations cannot deduct the first 1% of corporate pre-tax profits given to charity. So yes, they will be paying taxes on their charitable gifts until those gifts exceed 1% of corporate pre-tax profits. It will change the behavior of our corporate supporters, so we should talk about that a little bit. So where did all that go? You'll see that in 2024, every sector enjoyed an increase in charitable giving. You'll see that some of the biggest increases went to organizations that frankly are supported by high net worth donors. That these donors, people give when they feel secure and stable and comfortable in their finances. And these folks all saw their portfolios gain in 2024. Stock market had great returns. They were feeling good about things in 2024. And so what we saw was that the sectors that enjoy support from high net worth households tended to see the best performance. What's the highest growth here? What sector received the highest growth? What the heck is public society benefit? It's a mishmash. And by the way, Giving USA did not decide on these sectors. The IRS did, working with the Urban Institute. All of your organizations have something called an NTEE code. And if anybody can tell me what that means in the next 30 seconds without Googling it, I'll give you a code for a free subscription to Giving USA. So public society benefit is a sector that includes sort of a mishmash. One thing that it includes is United Way's and other corporate giving programs, collective giving programs like that. Is there anybody here from United Way today? Oh, that's a shame. But I think that we've all seen that as United Way has gone from being sort of the community chest model to the collective impact model, frankly, that shift has resulted that their business model tends to be raising less money year over year, unless there's something episodic like a pandemic. So it includes that, but that's kind of going down. It includes advocacy organizations, the right to vote, gun control, or access to guns. Any kind of advocacy organization is included here. And we have certainly seen a lot more conversation about those kinds of organizations. And finally, the big one, commercial donor-advised funds. So this is gifts to Fidelity and Schwab Staff 360 and National Philanthropic Trust, not your local community foundation. Because of the IRS, those are counted in a different sector. But that's really what's driving the growth in public society benefit. And if we take a look at trends over time, what do we see here? Who is losing market share? Gifts to religion. That is almost exclusively gifts to houses of worship of any faith. And what we have seen is that since the beginning of this century, about 20 million households have stopped actively participating in worship. And since the beginning of this century, about 20 million households have stopped actively giving every year. We don't know that they're the same 20 million households. We can cite correlation, not causation. But what I would say is a challenge for all of us as professionals is how do we ensure that the next generation learns to give if they don't see their parent in the pew at the synagogue or the church or the temple putting an envelope in the plate when it's passed? How do we model that behavior for them so that they understand that kind of pro-social behavior is appropriate? Now, I will say giving to religion has grown. It's just grown more slowly than everything else, so they're losing market share. A couple of other things that I'll just unpack real quickly, and then I want to get to the panel discussion. One is that you will take a look. We have education as number 2 here, but actually it's been overtaken by human services. Human services has now been in the second spot for the last 3 years or so, and I suspect that that is a long-term shift that we've seen. For one thing, we work with some colleges and universities, and we know that alumni giving, especially giving from young alumni, is plummeting. You know, some institutions have 5, 8, 12% of their alumni giving back, and graduates of the last decade is an even smaller percentage. And why is that? Because those who were born before 1964 tended to have institutional loyalty. Those born after 1964 have absolutely no interest in making a philanthropic investment in a worthy charitable organization. But they are passionate about a cause. And human services easily define their work and message their work as a cause. Higher ed, some other sectors, not so much. So I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen that shift permanently. I'm just gonna go through, I'm gonna skip through some slides to get to just a few highlights. As I said, the whole infographic you can download at our website, or I've got a handful with me if anybody would like one. One of the things that we're seeing, so if you're trying to figure out, okay, individual donors, we probably need to strengthen our individual giving program, and we probably want to do that with donors at all levels, whether they're giving $100 or $100,000. How do we do that? One of the ways is through some of these sustainer programs, monthly giving programs. And yes, credit cards expire, and it's a pain in the neck to chase people down and get the renewals, but do it, it's worth it. And this is one of the best tools you have for donor retention. One of the other things that we see, we talked about donor advised funds. There are 2 things that you cannot do with a donor advised fund. Does anybody know what they are?
You can't give them benefits, right?
Right, you can't give benefits. So if you're having a gala and the taxable value of the dinner and the dance and on the tchotchkes is $250 for a $1,000 ticket, you cannot pay for that from your DAF. Some DAFs will allow you to pay the $750 that is tax deductible, some won't. That's up to the donor to figure that out. But you cannot provide benefits, and you cannot fulfill a pledge. So if any of you are in multi-year campaigns and you're asking your donors to make a 5-year pledge, be sure to stop and ask, is there any chance that you would be fulfilling this pledge from your donor advised fund? And so why is that? It's because the same dollar cannot exist on 2 balance sheets at the same time. Those dollars actually legally belong to the community foundation or Fidelity or Schwab or wherever it's being held. It's on their balance sheet. And as the donor advisor, and full transparency, I'm the advisor to 2 donor advised funds. As the donor, it's not my money anymore, legally, and I have no right to encumber it. So, but the other thing we see is that when there are economic headwinds like there are now, many donors are cautious about making a multi-year pledge. I'm not sure what next year's gonna bring. I don't know what's happening with this economy, what next executive orders might do to my job. And so what we see is that more and more organizations are shifting to something called an intent to give. Really, it's that simple, an intent to give. So if they want to provide multi-year support to your campaign, but they can't do it, but they're gonna use their DAF, simply change the words from pledge to intent to give. And then check with your auditor and make sure that they're happy with that change. Because I raised a CPA, but I am not one. And you can't book that. We won't go into all of the details, but many donors are going to be more comfortable with an intent to give right now, which is not legally enforceable, than a formal legal pledge. I want to find one more that I'm going to touch on. And here it is. So you saw, if you looked, you saw that giving from bequests has held steady at about 7 to 9% of total giving since we've been doing the data. So, and this is largely individuals who've made arrangements in their estate plan for you to receive a bequest. 80 to 85% of all planned gifts are simple bequests. So don't feel like you have to have a fancy, knowledgeable, expensive planned giving person on your staff. If you want to do a planned giving program, you can talk to people about bequests. Really, it's about having them fall in love with your mission. So what we know, how many of you have heard of the great intergenerational transfer of wealth? How many of your organizations have just been inundated with bequests? How many of you are beginning to lose faith in the great intergenerational transfer of wealth? So here's what we know, is that when this first came out, people were looking at typical life tables to figure out when they thought this transfer of wealth would begin to occur. But what they didn't take into account was two things. Wealthy people live longer. Generous, wealthy people live longest of all. And so really, we won't see this reach its zenith. We'll be about halfway through this intergenerational transfer of wealth in 2045, when half of the baby boom population has reached age 85. But it's $18 trillion is expected to flow to nonprofit organizations. The total, those born before 1964 have amassed more wealth than any generation ever in the history of the world. So Americans born before 1964 have more wealth than any generation ever in the history of the world. It is not distributed equitably. So let's start there. About $120 trillion by some estimates. Now, I'm in this category. We'll spend some of that, some on lifestyle, some on healthcare, some on taxes. We'll pass about 95 to 100 trillion to our heirs, generations X, Y, Z, and A. 18 trillion will flow to nonprofit organizations. It will happen. It's inevitable. The money is there. We will die. The money is going to pass either to your organization or to the next generation. $18 trillion. If every one of America's 1.5 million nonprofit organizations received an equal share, we'd each get $12 million. And please put it in your endowment. It will not be distributed equally. It will go to the organizations that are having active conversations with their donors about the opportunity to support your mission in perpetuity. You have to get comfortable with having these conversations with people. And then the final thing I will say before I hand it over to Laura for the panel is, if that $18 trillion were endowed, the annual draw would exceed total giving in 2024. If that $18 trillion were endowed, the annual draw would be more than $600 billion. So that too is an opportunity for your organization. It's a far-sighted one. You'll be planting trees whose shade you will not enjoy. But don't you wish somebody had been doing it 20 years ago for you at your organization? So that's all good work that we need to do as well. I'm going to stop there. There are a bunch of other slides. They're all in the infographic, and you may have some questions that would be addressed in the other content that we have. And Suzanne, are we making this deck available to everybody as well?
We can, absolutely. Great. Excellent. Can we get a round of applause? Thank you. So I think I'm going to kick off our panel with probably the question that's top of mind for most folks in this room, that last year the numbers looked pretty optimistic. We felt pretty good, maybe not great as always, but we felt pretty good last year. This year is incredibly different. So how can we use data like this, or can we use data like this to inform how we run our programs now when we are in kind of a twilight zone, very different situation with fundraising and all the other things?
You want me to jump in? Sure. I think a couple of things. As I said, the data goes back to 1967. And so we have seen what's happened to charitable giving in a variety of economic circumstances. And we can compare, the past doesn't predict the future perfectly, but we can compare what's happened in the past to what we might expect this year. I'll say one thing that we've seen in the past is that since 1967, charitable giving has declined only 5 times in current dollar terms. It doesn't always keep pace with inflation, but it's gone down only 5 times. 2 of those times occurred after major tax legislation was passed. What happened this year? What we saw was that people rushed to give in the year before it took effect. So I would say that because of the passage of this new tax act, your high net worth donors are going to be they're going to want to give this year. Their tax treatment is going to be more generous this year than it will be next year. So I would look at my records and say, who typically makes a significant gift to our organization in January through June? I want to be talking to those folks now to see if they want to shift their giving forward in December. The other thing that we've seen is that the Tax Act, though, will have more generous treatment for everyday donors. So donors who don't generally itemize tax deductions now have the opportunity to deduct $1,000 per person or $2,000 per household. So I'd also be looking at who are some of the donors who make those more modest gifts. If you're going to do a year-end appeal, I would not have that usual PS, please give by December 31st. I would have, please give by January 30th, because they might prefer to push their giving into 2026 based on the tax environment. And then the final thing I'll say is that in every economic environment, there are winners and there are losers. You are not held hostage to this data. You have the opportunity to thrive. It might be a little harder, it might require some different strategies, but in every economic environment, you can thrive.
Love that. Amy and Tony, do you guys did any of this surprise you? Does this feel in line with what you experienced from your giving programs last year?
It does. One of the things that we've really focused on is diversifying our sources of funding, because a lot of people, so Crossroads Community Ministries focuses on those who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. And a lot of people in that sector are very dependent on federal dollars, whether directly from HUD or filtered down through state and local municipalities. As we've seen that fluctuate, especially in what is coming, and in this year with the DOGE cuts, we've been a little bit more stable because we have seen very consistently these percentages between individuals, churches, corporations, foundations, and public dollars. So that has helped us a good deal, but that also keeps a certain percentage of our funding in flux year to year. And to one of Laura's points, depending on what may be happening between legislation or a pandemic, those things have caused huge ebbs and flows in giving from all sectors. And so it can be hard to project. I'm doing a projected budget for our next fiscal year, and it's like, well, here's my best guess. And so we just kind of have to wait and see how different sectors respond to those events that occur.
Ashley.
I think that's press it. This is my first time using a mic. No, I think the information's spot on. Giving USA always gives us relevant information as a guide and recognizing that it is directionally accurate. But I think it's always important for nonprofits, small or large, to layer that in with our current data that we have internally. Last year, we were fortunate enough to receive a pro bono project with McKinsey to evaluate our revenue streams. So note to the nonprofits in the room, get a board member from McKinsey. It really pays off. You don't have to subscribe to Giving USA. No, but it, ironically enough, sorry. Ironically enough, the data that we received was spot on with the data you've heard today. We're recognizing that individual growth has a huge potential for us. I think most of us in the room here in Atlanta recognize Atlanta is different. We pride ourselves on that. But when I've worked at Hands on Atlanta, Westside Feature Fund, and now Boys and Girls Club of Metro Atlanta, also known as BGCMA, if easier for some of us, most of our wealth and most of our revenue comes from foundations and corporations. We all have a lot of potential in individuals, proven by the data that we're seeing today. So making investments there, making touches there, whether it is major gift opportunities, leadership giving, or planned giving. I think that's all teaching us how to look at the data differently and put it into action. But I can't stress it enough, the importance to layer it in with our data that we hold internally. We have a wealth of information in our CRM systems, and we have to utilize that for our best advantages.
Excellent. Atiba, I'm really curious. So obviously, nonprofit fundraisers, we are paying attention to this kind of data. We're looking at it. We're combing through, trying to understand how we're going to tackle this upcoming year. Do foundations look at this? And does this impact how you guys donate?
Are there funders here? So I can't really speak on behalf of funders on this question. And I have to say, at our foundation, we don't really look at national data on giving. And if we do get information that's related to Georgia specific, we may look at it. But it's not something that we routinely look at, But I need to say something because I didn't know you were going to read our bios. Oh. So I just want to say something to the audience, yes. a kind of through line here. Because I've only been in this philanthropic role in the 21st century. So back in the 1990s, I really started at Hands On Atlanta and helped to build what became the AmeriCorps program. And then I left Hands On Atlanta and went to work for the Task Force for the Homeless. And Crossroads Ministries was one of those organizations that we worked a lot with. But at the beginning of the 21st century, my university, Brown University, had a guy who was the president who decided he didn't like Brown. He went back to the Ohio State University to help them raise $1 billion. Yeah, and we ended up getting a new president named Ruth Simmons, the first woman and the first African-American president. And I share it with you simply because she also came with this big vision. We can raise $1 billion, but we can also answer this question that people keep asking me. What's your institution's connection to slavery? And she decided, I don't know. Let me see what they have in the books. And there wasn't much. And so she created a commission that went and studied this connection between the Brown brothers and their slave trade industry. And while that was going on, they raised $1 billion. And what she proved is that we can deal with these American problems we have that go back to the beginning of this country and still raise money for nonprofit organizations. And so I share that with you in this moment we're in because it really is about speaking truth about our past and our present. And the other funders here will probably agree with me on this in general. What funders normally say is, yeah, we'll help you at this stage, but to sustain yourself, you probably need some public funding because that's where most of the money is. We can't say that anymore, right? Because this federal government, of the people, by the people, for the people, seems to be against the people. And I think this is where, is an existential moment for us. We got to change this because the federal government should be really helping nonprofits with all these issues we've been talking about.
So, yes. So I'm curious to hear, and I think anybody here can add to this question. When we're looking at Giving USA data, when we look at Inside Philanthropy or the Chronicle, and we're talking about, Melinda Gates and all of these big high net worth donors making major impacts, we see Gates Foundation spending down, things like that. And then we look at our email and our own CRM. How does any of that impact the ways that you talk to your donors or fundraise, or impact the ways in which you speak to your boards about fundraising when they might be looking for you to call Tyler Perry tomorrow?
Yes and no. Certainly, we are aware of what's taking place, and we want to benefit from some of those things that occur. I don't know if anybody in here knows this, but there is some competition for funding among nonprofits. Is that surprising?
I'm next to Atiba.
Oh, And so sometimes it's hard to get recognized if you're a frontline nonprofit, kind of like what we do. And so trying to put out a narrative that can gain some attention amongst the incredible noise that, and I think most people in this room are probably like me. You probably get 15 to 20 emails a day from different causes, right? Or nonprofits or things like that. And at some point, there's a bit of fatigue to where I'm just not going to read that one this time. And so finding those avenues to access and have those conversations can be really difficult for smaller nonprofits, which to me is unfortunate because I feel like we're having a greater effect with fewer dollars than some larger nonprofits would. And that's kind of being missed in the decision making.
Right. I think a lot of organizations, we kind of pat ourselves on the back for doing a lot with less, and that's a dangerous narrative often. Laura.
I have a bit of a contrarian view on this. I do not subscribe to the notion of donor fatigue. First of all, I think the language sounds like we're blaming the donors. And if donors are tired of anything, they're tired of organizations that have a sense of entitlement. They're tired of organizations that use the same old tactics and old ineffective messages. I was asked to testify in front of county commissioners and city council in Columbus who are trying to figure out their response to this odd funding moment. And I pointed out that there's an organization in Columbus that sprang up in 2016, and since 2016, they have raised more than $65 million. Donors aren't tired of being connected to causes that resonate. And so I think the challenge that we all have is how do we substantiate, show that we can deliver on our promises, differentiate, show that we're the best organization to deliver on our promises, but most importantly, resonate, make me care. And the way to resonate is to tell a story. You probably have 100 stories a day. And if anybody wants to really learn more about this, I would strongly encourage you to follow a guy named Dr. Russell James. Any followers of Russell James in the room? Most of his stuff's on LinkedIn and free. He's a PhD at Texas Tech who does really interesting things like he recruits donors to come to his lab. And first he talks to them about their consumer decisions to see what part of their brain lights up. It's the logic center. And then he shifts and starts talking to them about their acts of generosity. A completely different part of the brain is activated. It's the pleasure center. And so we know that when we do our job right, the donor gets great joy out of their giving and doesn't become fatigued. So I think that's something that we can all manage. And as I said, James's stuff is available for free on his LinkedIn profile, and it's about storytelling. And some of those close to the ground nonprofit organizations have the best opportunity to tell stories.
It's working this time. Okay. I wanted to go on the record that I have called Tyler Perry because of a board request. And so we tried that way and it did not work. So while it is exciting that there is this philanthropic capacity out there that we can all, hope for and dream about, it's not something that we're going to put in our forecast for the year. And I think because of that, we have to stay true to our fundamental day-to-day. I will say my team hears this all the time, that fundraising is a team sport. And because of that, we've had a wonderful, mentor and someone that we admire bring to us the cake and icing analogy, which I'm sure you've all heard. So our cake is our daily revenue and our operating budget that we strive to show the impact of our programs. The icing are the things on our back burner that we want to do that we don't have budget to try. So I want that cake fully baked. I want it so baked it's burnt. And I want it to be so stable that our organization shows this amazing financial stability year over year and that we're an asset in the community that the community can rely on. The icing, last year we did receive an amazing surprise gift from a funder, and we had a project top of mind that we wanted to try to pilot. So we're doing that this year. And I've told the team, show me the data there. Show me the impact. Show me the stories that we're going to have and the kids we're going to reach that wouldn't have the opportunity to see Boys and Girls Club with this pilot. At that point, we can go back to other funders and partners and say, see what we've done. We are tried and true. Come work with us. Come believe in us and reinvest. Then that icing becomes part of the cake, and that's how we grow sustainably. And then I'm gonna go find a new $1 billion donor to give me more icing and just hope that happens. It could happen one day to one of us in this room to have the opportunity. The likelihood, 1%, and that's fine, but stick to your daily fundamentals because that's what's gonna work and that's what's gonna help your organization be financially sustainable and then top of mind to donors.
I just wanted to sort of echo what my colleagues have said here with the specific reference. I don't know, is Tyler Perry a Boys and Girls Club alumni?
No. Shaq, Usher, Sierra. I think now I'm talking at both sides of my mouth.
Well, no, again, I asked because when I was working at the Task Force on Homeless, he was one of those homeless individuals in Atlanta. And so I asked the question, what is he doing to support those organizations? I do know of at least one of them he does support. And again, this goes back to what Laura has been saying about her experience in higher education. And it is kind of unfair because those institutions have been around a lot longer than most nonprofit organizations. But this idea of trying to reach people that you have impacted over the years who have become successful in some form or fashion, which proved that your assistance made a difference to become donors, and not just quietly, but sort of in a public way, so that's part of that storytelling, so people see, oh yeah, well, if it helped them and they did it and they became, then maybe I can do it too.
And can I just say, a story is not an example or an anecdote. A story is about generally one person, almost always a person. You can make an inanimate object a hero, but usually one person who has a starting state, a journey that includes challenges, overcoming those challenges, and an elevated ending state. So unless what you're doing is providing that journey, you're just giving an example, and that's not going to resonate.
I'm going to throw a question to you guys that I did not preview to you, so get ready. So thinking through kind of the environment that we're in now, as nonprofits in general, right? Our ecosystem, our industry. We've all seen Diane Yentel making a lot of great comments online. We've seen the new National Council of Nonprofits with their new kind of promotion of nonprofits and why people should care about them. What could we be doing more in Atlanta or in Georgia together as nonprofits and funders, the whole philanthropic ecosystem here, to make sure people in Georgia really understand what we're facing and how important it is for them to be continuing to support our organizations? Is there some sort of, should we start a coalition today, right now? Like, what should we do?
Yes on that. But I think for us at Boys and Girls Club Metro Atlanta, we're doing two things I think that we're doing well in this moment. We're doing more collaborative opportunities with other partner nonprofits. Like any other nonprofits in the room want to do a collaborative grant proposal, call me, because I think that there's a lot of work being done that is duplicative. I know we all say nonprofits are trying to work together and then funders want us to work together. It's hard to collaborate across different lines. It's not when you're intentional about it. And so I think we have to be more intentional about some of those causes and things that we're working on together. And then secondly, advocacy. We are fortunate enough to be a federated model and have the national office right here in Atlanta advocating for us at a federal, state level. But I will tell you, we are the boots on the ground. We're the ones getting the advocacy messages out there, doing draft letters for your congresspeople. It's a simple QR code. Our marketing team put it together. It's not that hard to get it out to your stakeholders. And we're doing it over and over and over. We just recently got our 21st century funding back for the moment. This is a moment. It's not going to be insured next year or in the future. So we are not stopping that work because that is pivotal dollars for us that would potentially close several of our clubs. So I think the more that we can stress, ironically enough, our theme for our signature event this year is the power of now. So the more that we can collaborate together and do those actions together, it's no longer about words, it is action.
I think to start with a data-informed foundation. So if you look at folks like Edelman or Pew that measure trust in American society today, what you will see is that generally trust has declined across the board, but it's declined less for nonprofit organizations than any other sector of the economy. And it has the highest spot. So know that you're starting from a position of trust and do everything you can to protect that trust. And then I would go read a report from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy called What Do Americans Think About Nonprofits? And my conclusion on reading it is not much. They do not think about nonprofits very often. In fact, only 5% of the people they surveyed believed that their life had been touched by a nonprofit organization. They're born in a hospital, they work out at the YMCA, they went to a college or university, they send their kids to pre-K, but they don't think their life has been touched by a nonprofit organization. So I think part of what we need to do is make them aware of the fact that every American benefits from a robust nonprofit economy, and that, in fact, their lives have been touched by this.
Excellent. So before we jump to questions, I have one last question. Or sorry, Atiba, do you want to jump in?
I just want to share the one example, sort of, it was almost 25 years ago when I started working in philanthropy at the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation. My daughter was in high school, and she said, was I willing to come to the career fair because they have different people, different occupations. I was like, oh yeah, I would love to, And so it was a class of honors English. These are juniors and seniors, And so I started talking, and I mentioned about nonprofits, and one of them raised their hand. I said, yeah. What's your question? She said, I thought nonprofits were people volunteer. I said, well, they do, but people actually work and they get paid. She goes, oh, really? And then I thought about it. There's no place in high school where there's this explanation of the nonprofit sector. And yet, and it's so crazy because that year, working for Arthur Blank, I was there when he bought the Atlanta Falcons. And I found out the NFL is a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. The teams are not, but the NFL is, So I'm just saying that there is this lack of information about the nonprofit sector, as Laura said, is just abysmal. And again, I think having some kind of a coalition that is telling the story to American people, because the sad truth is the nonprofit sector is addressing the problems created by the for-profit sector and not being covered by the public sector.
Mm-hmm. Amen. So, okay, before we get to Q&A, I have one last question that I'm going to throw to Laura, specifically about the tax laws here. So you mentioned in your presentation that corporate giving is traditionally about 1% of pre-tax profit for corporations. But now in this new tax law, the first 1% will not be deductible. So what does that say to us? What should we be looking out for as fundraisers? What should we be preparing for? And for any of our corporate folks in this room, what can we tell them to encourage that they continue giving even despite that?
The Chronicle of Philanthropy asked me to write an op-ed on this. It's in the current issue, so if you want more, read that. So, like you said, on average, corporations in America give 0.92% of corporate pre-tax profits. Giving from corporations has grown significantly. In fact, we had a great year this year, but that's mostly because corporate pre-tax profits have grown. Pre-tax profits have grown faster than giving from corporations. Once upon a time, corporations gave, on average, 2% of pre-tax profits, and the late, great Ken Dayton, who had a family department store in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and then went through a brand realignment, and that's now called Target. So advocated for 5% because he thought it was good for the corporation and good for the community. That's not what's happening. What I would say is that, so starting next year, The first 1% of corporate pre-tax profits that a corporation gives away is not tax deductible. They will pay taxes on that. So let's assume it's $100 million in corporate pre-tax profit, and this corporation gives $2 million a year. First of all, applaud them. They're giving 2% of corporate pre-tax profits. And all of that was tax deductible. So they were only taxed on $98 million worth of income. Now they'll be taxed on $99 million of income, and they'll pay $210,000 in taxes on that first $1 million of grant making. Where do you think that's going to come from? It's going to come out of their grant making budget. So I think a few things will happen. First of all, again, if you have corporate funders who typically give to you sometime between January and June, talk to them now. Find out if they would like to make that gift in this year where the tax treatment will be more generous for them. Secondly, I think that what we will see is that corporations who have been supporting things that lead to workforce development or perhaps are elevate their brand and could be sponsorships, marketing spending, workforce development spending, that's all legitimate business expenses that are fully tax deductible. They might want to go from being a donor to being a partner in some sort of an earned revenue contract. So ask your corporate representative, hey, can you introduce me to some other people within this entity because I know that we might want to be switching up how this transaction occurs. And then the final thing I'll say is that those corporations also will continue to give, but Ernst & Young did a study, they were commissioned by independent sector, and they estimate that corporate giving is probably going to go down somewhere 4 to 8% next year as a result of this change in the tax law. So it will be interesting to see how it all shakes out, but I would say talk to them now and see, A, do they want to accelerate their giving this year? And B, how do they want to engage with you in years ahead?
Thank you for that. All right, I think we're going to move to audience questions now. So, and I believe I have some assistants here that are going to bring around microphones. If you have a question, please wait until one of these lovely ladies comes to you with a microphone. And yeah, so hold up here. Oop. Here you
go. As our current administration embraces Reaganism, I want to know what the data suggests about trickle-down economics in the nonprofit sector. I don't personally believe in it, but it seems like that's the way that the world is going, and I just want to know how it's going to affect everything.
I'm not anybody an economist up here? Anybody? And the ones we work with at Indiana University always shudder when I start to speak. I don't think that there's any evidence that anything trickled down when this tax environment began, and so I don't think that there's a lot of hope that that's going to be the impact this time around. I will think at Atiba, I like the way that you've positioned some of this. So one silver lining in the new tax legislation is that we've returned a tax benefit for giving to everyday donors. So the other thing I would be looking at is who in your database gives up to $1,000 per individual or $2,000 per couple. Who are those folks, and can we be having conversations with them about their giving and accelerating it? You know, most studies would say people and corporations don't give primarily because of the tax benefits, but the reality is that it's a nudge, and when it was eliminated in 2017, it was a nudge in the wrong direction. Now it's a nudge in the right direction. But I do share your fear that this continued trend in the tax policy is only going to continue the separation between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I am part of that, she didn't use this, boomer generation. And so I started in the 60s, now I'm in my 60s. And I remember when President Reagan and David Stockman came up with this whole trickle-down theory. My wife was working at the Community Foundation. I was living in Rhode Island, and it's a statewide community foundation. And what they saw over that time period was the number of applications from nonprofit organizations just escalate. And I expect that's going to happen, you know, now. But I think, again, it's clear that we do not have sufficient funds on the private foundation side, at least, to close that gap, you know.
Thank you.
Good morning. I just want to preface this by saying I'm going to ask two difficult questions. The first one's less difficult. And well, I'm being serious, like very serious, because as a white grant professional, there are certain things that I feel obligated to ask because there's certain people that are either never in the room or don't feel comfortable asking. So, first of all, regarding DAFs, and everyone is trying to convince organizations we work with to diversify. But when it comes to DAFs, I know there's conversations with some of them to increase the percentage of their giving, especially given the current situation. So I would just like a little insight from your side as to where we're at in that conversation. The second question, which is very difficult, Black-led organizations, who are typically the ones being led by people who are in the community, have the trust of the community, have the lived experience, already only receive, on a good day, 2%, and this is foundational, I can't speak for everything else. Being that they don't have those relationships, and the people who, the white-led organizations, have staff and time to do everything you're talking about, these people, and I've been in rooms with them, they're doing direct service 24/7. So, in all that consideration, what is your advice?
I'm glad you brought up your second question because that's kind of the difficult question I'm sitting up here wrestling with. Even though we are a white-led organization, we're a direct service organization, and one of the issues with getting the stories and the things out there is capacity. And of course, I can sit here and tell you, yes, we can partner and collaborate and this and that. But I was having a conversation with a board member the other day is, you know, one staff member is worth 50 volunteers because they're focused on that particular issue. And so it can be really, it can be a challenge to prioritize both your budget and the time you spend each day when there are 75 people at your door begging for services. And so how do you as a small nonprofit who doesn't have that big back room of development and marketing and branding and media, and I think that's where some of the conversation with foundations could go is there, and I know capacity building grants are out there, but how do we potentially partner to get those? How do we change our approach? How do we become a part of the conversation if those people aren't in the room? And so that's not an answer. That's just commiserating with the point you bring up as to we do have to be more intentional and more creative in the way that we address that as small nonprofits and direct service providers.
I just applaud everyone in small, gritty nonprofits, especially those that are minority-led. This is my first job at a really big nonprofit, I will note. My last opportunity was at Westside Feature Fund. 10-year anniversary this year, supporting the residents and community on the West Side. A historically Black community, the AUC, previously Black-led organization. Now John Almond has been the CEO there for about 7 years. And I have so much respect for the boots on the ground, purpose-led intentionality that they have done. They have led now monthly gatherings called their West Side Summit. The next one is this Friday morning at the Gathering Spot. Shameless plug, still love them. And I think it's important to look at how they're bringing together their residents, the academic and educators in the community, their stakeholders and donors, people like Dan Cathy show up, and they're bringing in relevant panelists that are relevant to the community, whether it be new banks coming in the community, new developers where they can ask questions, and then also having the opportunity for Q&As. So you're bringing together a room full of people that are really purpose-led, have a stake in the community, but come from all backgrounds. And that's something that I've always been able to use as a best practice and showcase, like, you don't have to have separate rooms of people. Again, I've said it before, but Atlanta is different. I'm a real believer. I'm from Columbus, so Laura and I have that in common, but I truly believe Atlanta is different. And Atlanta is a place where funders, public leaders, private sector all want to be in the room together to collaborate so we can make difference together. And I think the more we can look at those best practices and try to continue those in different ways, we can hopefully all be in the room. But it's a lot easier said than done.
That's Columbus, Georgia? Oh. I'm a Yankee too, so I'm not. But I'm just want to say thank you for raising the second question. And again, that's the reason why I wanted to share this experience with Ruth Simmons as the president of Brown, because there's this notion in America that if we talk about these difficult issues from our past, we somehow can't be successful in the present. And the truth is, no, the only way we can be successful in the present is to be able to talk about these issues from the past. The reference to my everyday hero, I used to say I'm volunteering for this organization, the BRAG Dream Team, Bike Right Across Georgia Dream Team. But the truth is, I've been running a nonprofit for 30 years on the side. And it's crazy because up until 2 years, it was all volunteers. 2 years ago, we finally got a grant to hire a staff person for 28 years, you know. And again, that has helped me as a funder because I realized how challenging it is to get money from us. But I got to make a shameless plug because I have a great colleague and friend, Birgit Burton, who started the African American Development Officers Organization about 25 years ago on the side, because she's working full-time at Georgia Tech. And they're having a conference next month. I would encourage you to go. Ta-Nehisi Coates is the keynote speaker. And he's very well at talking about the past and the present. So really, highly recommend it. The last thing I just wanted to say has to do with donor advised funds because, believe it or not, we're a family foundation and we have donor advised funds. And we use it for different purposes, but one of them I wanted to highlight is matching gifts. So all the employees that work in the Zeist family office, we do matching gifts. And what I discovered over the years is we really weren't tracking it. And what I discovered, everybody wasn't using it, and everybody wasn't using the max. And I just wondered, does anybody have any data on that? But it seems to me that's an area where we could really help the nonprofit sector if we get people to maximize those matching gifts through the donor advised funds.
Yeah, I'll take them in reverse. I'll talk about donor advised funds for a moment. And you heard me say I'm an advisor to two. So our firm has a donor advised fund at the Columbus Foundation, the Fund for the Common Good, that we use to match our employees' donations. We want to make sure we can keep that promise in good times and bad. So we put some money in there when we can and match their gifts. And then my husband and I have a donor advised fund, also at the Columbus Foundation. In part because as a fundraising consultant, it's perilous for me to give in my name in my own hometown. I don't support all of our clients. I give to some organizations that aren't our clients. And so even though the recipient knows who it's coming from, they can recognize the KFLM fund of the Columbus Foundation, and everybody wonders who that is. Giving USA in when did it come out? 2022 came out with our second special report on donor advised funds. And by the way, if you subscribe, you get access to the whole back catalog. And so, again, this should be a data-informed conversation. So what we know is that right now, donor-advised funds, even there is no agreement amongst scholars or academicians or practitioners about how to measure donor-advised fund activity. So if somebody cites a data point with great confidence, just understand that there's no agreement on this yet. It's maturing. But even the stingiest estimate says that donor-advised funds pay out an average of 14% per year. So that's far more than the 5%. And one of my concerns is that if we bring regulation to bear that says that donor-advised funds have to pay out at least 5%, that as with foundations, people are going to see that not as the floor but the ceiling. And they're going to start, oh, I'm supposed to pay out 5%. I guess that's what I'll do. On average, a dollar that goes into a donor-advised fund, 92 cents of it will be paid out within 5 years. And many people, like my husband and I, use it continually. We're always putting money in. There is an issue with zombie funds. There's a reason why a donor-advised fund might lie fallow for 2 or 3 years. But if nobody's tapped into it in 8 or 10 years, that is a problem, I'll agree. But those are by far the vast minority of funds. The other thing I would say to you is having a conversation about donor-advised funds is sort of like having a conversations about people who give by writing checks or give by using a credit card. It's simply a transaction platform. So the way in which you would approach a donor-advised fund donor is the same as how you would approach somebody who gives by writing you a check or gives by handing you their credit card. It's simply a transaction platform.
Hi, thanks everybody. My question is not difficult. I'm Michelle Egan at MedShare. I'm the Chief Development Officer. Thank you guys so much for being here. My question is about cause and purpose possible. You do cause-related partnerships between a corporation and a nonprofit that leverages assets to raise money and awareness for a nonprofit. Like that's what cause relationships are. Historically, Giving USA doesn't track the cause dollars that are generated by either point of sale, consumer gifts, or employee gifts. And I think that is disgraceful, but because it's a huge piece of giving. So it's not disgraceful, sorry, that was a bad choice of words. But why not? And when are we going to do something about that? And it speaks to it's a huge asset. So that's my question.
So I'll say a couple of things. First of all, my comments about donor-advised funds are my comments. I was speaking as Laura MacDonald, not as the former chair of the Giving USA Foundation, but now I will speak as the former chair of the Giving USA Foundation. We are very clear about our lane. We measure the sources and uses of charitable giving in America today. So if there is a charitable transaction, if there is a charitable gift and then a receipt by the nonprofit organization, it is tracked in Giving USA. So for example, we work with a number of, we work with some Ronald McDonald houses. Is the Ronald McDonald House in the room today? They do a lot of work, and with pediatric health systems, children's hospitals. Oftentimes there's a roundup at the register at Costco or certainly at McDonald's. A lot of the franchisees collect customer money. Now the customers don't deduct that, it doesn't show up on their tax return, but almost always a check is written by Costco or McDonald's or whomever, and that's the charitable transaction. So it is tracked in Giving USA. What's not tracked are giving to individuals through something like GoFundMe. Now, if it's going to a nonprofit, we count it, and that's our lane. We count charitable transactions. And when you take a look at $592 billion, while what you say is true, that there are great opportunities in cause-related marketing partnerships with corporations, but it's a fraction of that $592 billion.
All right, I think we have time for one more. Oh, we've got a couple over here, though. Let's see.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your insights. This has been really very informative and inspiring, too. Ashley, I liked what you said about your comment about nonprofits collaborating to solve the problems that that we all see and all are kind of working on together. And I wanted to ask Atiba, on the foundation side, you have a whole pool of nonprofits who fall within a giving bucket. And so I'm wondering what you do on the foundation side to aggregate the outcomes data and understand, from a community-wide perspective, how we're tracking towards those outcomes.
I got bad news. I work for a family that has had a tragedy no family would want. They lost 3 generations in a plane crash. And so those daughters who didn't go on that trip have to be twins, Nancy and Marie, over the past 22 years really have used the foundation as a way to recognize their family across 3 generations with nonprofits that serve children and youth. And we tend to say, what Laura's referring to, think about what lights up your brain. That's who you want to support. Now, the truth is, we do site visits, board and staff, and the nonprofits we support will tell you, we show up. So our data gathering is really more around the site visit process, because that's what determines whether or not they're going to invite you to apply. And if they do, you're going to get supported. And, you know, I'm in Laura's camp because, like I said, I study economics. On the other hand, truthfully, I don't think most of the giving is done based upon data. From the foundation level, individual level. The worst thing is that we are actually in a moment where data doesn't matter. Decisions are being made totally without regard to the data, you know? And so I think, again, we need to use data, but going back to what Laura's saying about this storytelling. And so with our board members, like I said, they want to hear the stories and talk to people about how they're making a difference. And so I would just say the one thing that we really struggle with is that most of the nonprofits applications we get have a whole lot of data about how bad the situation is, as if we don't know that. And so I would say, really, we need to flip it and talk about the issue in a way that's based upon the strengths and the assets that are there and that you're going to build upon. And so again, I think, again, some of this data we have talks about, you know, growth period, strengths, and so forth that you could weave in. But in general, we have to have a mindset that is asset-oriented and not deficit-oriented. Because unfortunately, a lot of what happens in America in terms of this charitable giving is from this mindset.
All right, I am being told that we're done. I want to thank our amazing panelists, Atiba, Ashley, Tony, Laura. Thank you. And thank you all for being here on, Wednesday morning. So I think we learned a lot. I think this was really helpful. I learned a lot from this conversation. And I would say one thing that I want to send us all home with especially is this idea that we talked about, that not a lot of folks outside our industry are really aware of what we're doing or why we're important. And I think it is all of our responsibilities to be making sure that is part of our advocacy, part of our message out to our donors, to our friends and family. Make people like your little brother come and listen to your panel so he understands what you do for a living. You know, these things are important. And if we don't talk about how important they are, then no one will know. But before we wrap up, I do want to say that I am excited to say that Purpose Possible, we are launching a new project, and it is focused on how to better understand how boards and staff can work together more effectively. We are asking a different question. Instead of what do boards do, or what makes a board good, we want to know, what does your organization actually truly need to thrive, and can a board help you with that? We are going to be sending out 2 quick surveys as we launch this research project. And so when you receive your follow-up from today, you'll receive these surveys, and also there's a QR code behind me. There are two. So there's one if you are an executive director or staff leader, you can fill that one out. And there's also one for board members. So please feel free to share this with your board so that they can reply. If you are a staff person and also a board member, you get to fill out both. And I would really love it if you did. So we're going to send those out. We're also going to be doing some additional research. We're doing some kind of focus groupy experiments as well. And then later this year, we will be publishing that data. We'll do a webinar, I'm sure, and share what we've learned about maybe if we can discover better ways to work together and actually get the job done. So again, thank you. Yes, sir?
Can we make a closing comment? Yeah. Closing comment.
Oh, each of it. Or I could take it back.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, the mic is on. Okay. This is a tough time. Like we keep saying that, it's unprecedented. Fundraisers, we're tired, right? We've been through a pandemic. Now we're going through another unprecedented season. We're all in it together. And I look at, we asked about outcomes for how we're doing. This is not a short closing comment, so I apologize. We were ranked 50th out of 50 here in Atlanta for cities with economic, I think, opportunities. And so there's a gathering coming up with the city officials and private and public sector coming together and how we change that. Charlotte was 50th and they went to 47th or 43 or jumped the 37th. They jumped a lot more than that. And I think we all have stake in the game to make that difference for us here. But we cannot pause in this moment. Like we need 2 feet on the gas at all times and we will come out the other side. But it is a moment where we all are in a different headspace and every day brings another uncertainty, but we do have to band together the best way we know how.
And to build on what both of you said, I think that it is a moment in which it is particularly difficult to look at the world through a lens of abundance. But building on what Atiba said, if we look for scarcity, we will find it. But if we can find a way to see the opportunities for abundance and to engage our donors and other stakeholders that way as well. Too often we engage them based on the assumption, this is horrible language, that they will try to get away with giving us as little as they can. And they know that that's in our brain if that's how we're engaging them. If instead we go to them or write to them or engage them and say, what can I do to inspire you to bring your best self to our cause? I think that we'll have a very different conversation, one with different outcomes, and certainly one that at the end of the day will not drain us as much as that conversation about scarcity.
I'd like to share a sermon on Matthew 25. Actually, this has been a great learning experience for me. So I'm on that frontline service side. I'm not on the data side. I'm not on the economic side. I'm not on the development side. But just to raise a voice for us limited staff, frontline service providers, we do want to be a part of the conversation. A lot of times these panels don't have that. I'm not saying giving USA or Purpose Possible, but other panels. And so it's always good to be able to present our challenges, to hear some of the solutions, but then also try to come up with ways that we can actually meet the day, meet the opportunity with very, very limited resources from the beginning. And how do we grow those? I want a bigger cake too. And so little at a time, hopefully we can find our way upriver in the current to those conversations, those opportunities, and the stories, getting to the people that are going to respond to those stories.
Thank you. Atiba has said enough, he said. Thank you guys all for being here today. Look forward to getting our email with our notes, recording, links to the surveys, all that good stuff. And thank you for all of what you do.